Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Jeff is once again at the Warner Media executive meeting today, but he will be back tomorrow. Just wanted everyone to know that. Why don't we start with Laura on COVID, please?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Dr. Anthony Fauci said that if the U.S. doesn't follow mitigation guidelines, masks, social distancing, no large crowds, there could be 400,000 deaths by this winter. Sadly, with the trends nationwide right now, that warning could become reality. Let's start with the cases. The U.S. is nearing 211,000 deaths and added 705 deaths yesterday. New cases are up 7% over last week, and that number was last seen the third week in August. Yesterday, 14 states posted over 1,000 new cases, and 5 of those were over 2,000. Hospitalization records were set in 7 states. There are 25 states showing upward trends, 22 steady, and only 3 showing downward trends. Those are Hawaii, Iowa, and South Carolina. These numbers are very, very much all across the United States. But looking at specific states, New York has identified 6 cluster areas that will have to close schools, essential businesses, except takeout dining, and limit the gatherings at houses of worship and no mass services. Businesses and the Bishop of Brooklyn have expressed outrage and frustration at the rollbacks, and there were some protests overnight. Wisconsin's emergency order goes into effect on Thursday to roll back openings there. The Green Bay Packers are putting an indefinite hold on allowing fans into Lambeau Field, and because the state is heading in the wrong direction. And we keep mentioning Kentucky, but those are one of those states that had 1,000+ cases yesterday, and had of those, 144 of those cases were children under the age of 18. For all of these threads, we have Adrian Brodas from Chicago and Alex Field from New York City. Plus, Miguel Marquez brings us the story of a family that lost 17 members to the disease. From Health, the FDA released and the White House agreed to information on the guidelines for the emergency use authorization for a coronavirus vaccine. It takes 2 months waiting period. This means, barring any surprises, that no one could seek EUA before mid-November based on the start of their trial. And hospitals will need to report positives for flu-like symptoms or the flu themselves that they currently do for the COVID-19. And if they do not, they will risk losing federal funds for Medicare and Medicaid. We have Sanjay Gupta available along with Jacqueline Howard on these threads. On schools, we continue to see reopenings in Miami-Dade today, along with a plan for Atlanta schools to gradually go in person, plus closures in New York around the clusters. We have Bianca Goldriga available on this. Sports is working to confirm a new Patriots player has tested positive. We have Andy Scholes available on sports. And filing the wrap today, before the debate, we have Erica Hill for 4 and 6.
Okay, thanks, Laura. And if ever there was a story that showed how COVID could dominate someone's life, it's certainly Miguel's, about the family that's lost 17 people. International on COVID.
Hey, Michael. So I'll focus mostly on Europe. That's where we're seeing a lot of the new lines this morning, just the surge continuing there and all the governments wrestling with how best to deal with it. Germany reported the highest number of daily infections since April. Frankfurt looking at new measures like curfews, masks, etc. Poland recorded its highest number of new daily confirmed cases, too. So Fred Pleiken has those lines. We also have some lines from Melissa Bell. Czech Republic overtaking Spain in COVID cases. Paris ICU patients have doubled in the past 2 weeks. Masks now mandatory in Italy. Brussels bars and cafes closed for a month. Is all of this enough to put the brakes on? So she'll tackle that. And then just out of the UK, Boris Johnson faced questions this morning in Parliament in the regular PMQs after we learned that thousands of COVID cases that I mentioned earlier in the meeting this week were left off official statistics because the Excel spreadsheet used reached its maximum size file and failed to update. So just kind of more embarrassment for him. And then Scotland also looks at lockdowns. So Scott has those headlines. So that's really where we are with COVID, mostly out of Europe this morning.
Thank you, Penny. There was an interesting note in, I think, the Washington Post. I think they had a story that said that there were more cases of COVID at the White House than there were in Taiwan in the last week, which was a good note related to
I think we were up at that angle first, Michael. I just got to say.
Okay, good. I'm glad you were.
Yeah.
It's a great headline. If you had it as a headline, I'm sorry I missed it. Business on COVID, please.
Michael, good morning. Markets rising this morning following yesterday's Trump tweet storm in which the president abruptly short-circuited stimulus negotiations, only appearing to reverse course 8 hours later, as Phil Mattingly has reported this morning. The president's Twitter account yesterday sending markets on a roller coaster ride with a sharp drop at the close, only to be followed by a tangible pre-market bump. Romans and Chatterley have both been up on this morning. Meanwhile, moments ago, Mark Meadows, briefing reporter, saying that Mnuchin is now pushing standalone bills. And according to our Betsy Klein, Meadows continuing to blame Pelosi, saying that she's failed to budge and not negotiating in good faith. He's saying he's optimistic about a piecemeal process. Kudlow is also talking about targeted aid on CNBC. And what does that targeted aid entail? Relief to airlines. The airline stock surging this morning. And as Pete Muntean reported yesterday, Trump's announcement was a major blow to airlines, an industry already facing mass layoffs. American Airlines saying it was disheartened, and United warning of devastating consequences without any relief. Pete Muntean is tracking all of this and working on a piece for the 3 o'clock show on workers. So we will be checking that closely. And of course, with talks uncertain, corporate America continuing to watch all of this in action with all the Business Roundtable is saying that it was deeply troubled by the sudden halt in negotiations, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce calling Trump's decision, quote, disappointing. Christina Alessi is up and available on all of those threads, and that is where we begin on COVID.
Okay. Thanks, Richard. All right. Virginia, let's go to you with everything in Washington on COVID, obviously centered around the president and the White House.
Okay, so coming off what Laura said about Fauci reporting 400,000 deaths by this winter if things don't change, we see a portrait of this White House in disarray, even by standards for this president. 19 people in and around the White House have tested positive. We still have no idea when Trump had his latest negative test. This outbreak has reached the top levels of the military, as Barbara was first to report yesterday. And then Kevin Liptak this morning on the president's desire to return to the Oval Office, complete with a isolation chart for visitors that would sit outside, and just completely back to his old ways in terms of downplaying this pandemic. We also know that he taped this video. We're unclear what happened to it, so we're looking into that today. And in terms of contract tracing, an email sent to the East Wing last night claiming that contract tracing had been complete. We have no signs of that. Meadows saying this morning that the White House socially distanced when possible, as much as possible, and we know that the mayor has had no luck in working with the White House on that. Then we have this behavior last night, 40 tweets last night, everything from Hillary Clinton to the FDA and it's continuing into this morning. The questions of what medications he's still on. He was supposed to finish remdesivir, his last course yesterday, but the question of still is he on steroids? And Pelosi, obviously publicly, and according to Kevin, White House aides privately are speculating that the drugs are having an impact on him. Richard talked about the stimulus and that blowing up, but that obviously was all part of this. So I think that's sort of where we start from the White House end on COVID.
Okay, I do have to say that I think it's funny that people think that the drugs are influencing Trump after he sends out 40 tweets and makes some quick and essentially irrational decisions, but I'll leave it at that. All right, let's open it up on COVID. Does anybody have anything on any of this that they want to bring up?
Yeah, Michael, on this, jumping off some of the health lines from Laura and also what Virginia just said, I wanted to let everybody know that Eli Lilly has just appealed to the FDA for an emergency use authorization for its monoclonal antibody therapy. Obviously, the monoclonal therapy President Trump got was made by Regeneron, but this is Eli Lilly striking while the iron is hot. We would normally not report on someone seeking an EUA because anyone can do that at any time, but we will be reporting on this one, obviously, We will have an alert on that shortly. Wanted to let everyone know that it is coming. And then Jamie Gumbrecht from Health also flagged Scott Gottlieb this morning, saying he expected a lot more attention to turn towards these sorts of therapies as the vaccine becomes less likely before Election Day. So some really important context there as well.
All right, thanks.
Michael, it's Carl. I'm not sure this is the right voice for this, but while we're discussing the COVID, is it possible that the real overarching story here is the simultaneous mental and physical breakdown of the President of the United States while he's presiding over a cover-up altogether? People I'm talking to are really, and on the Hill, are stressing that they believe, and this includes some Republicans, that he is in the midst of a mental breakdown. And that, and I'm just wondering if conceptually that isn't, and Maggie's story in the Times this morning, as well as our lead on the website, is terrific in this regard. But what are Republican senators and House leaders really saying to each other in private about the president's mental state? And are we moving toward a situation of kind of where people in the White House, and I think again this is happening from what I'm hearing, are really worried about a kind of wag the dog situation among other things. If you go back to the Nixon final days, the Secretary of Defense, Schlesinger, had plans to not let the president act if he thought things were too wild. Is anything like that being talked about? I really think we're moving right now toward that point, and I wonder about how that gets reflected in the coverage, the urgency of it.
Well, I would say a couple of things about that, Carl. One is, obviously, we can't just directly say that.
Of course not.
Yeah, as you know, I know. But we certainly, our reporters have been constantly digging both with people inside the White House and people on the Hill, get their takes. We've seen, if people could mute their phones, I think there's an echo. You've seen a variety of stories and reports from our White House team and also from our congressional team and others around the president on concerns about his actions, not just from like Nancy Pelosi saying, I think the steroids are affecting him, but from people on the inside saying that they weren't sure that he was, up to all this in his current, as you said, physical and mental situation with the drugs he's taking so I think we continue to dig on that. We continue to try to get people to talk about it on the record, if not on the record, on background. And I do know that, in Virginia's world, they are all constantly working on trying to draw from insiders who have either spoken to or observed the president on what his state of mind is. But if you have Mark Meadows just now in the gaggle saying the president's doing great, he may go to the Oval Office, et cetera, et cetera. So, there's not going to be any public face from those kinds of people that there's anything other than the president could go out on the campaign trail tonight and wants to give a national address and wants to be in the Oval Office and et cetera, et cetera. But I do think it's a worthwhile conversation to have about decisions that are being made. Again, like I said before, I'm not sure that the Donald Trump this COVID situation was any less likely to send out a string of 40 tweets or make what some people would consider an irrational decision. We know he has a temper. We know he changes course on a dime sometimes from right to left to center again. And I do think that, it's hard to lay out a line that would show you, wow, this is dramatically different from the rest of Donald Trump's presidency, where he has continued to surprise not only the people that are in his circle, but the people that are outside of it. So I would say all of those things, but again, we continue to dig on what's going on there, and we'll continue to report it out as we get it. What else do people have on COVID?
Hey, Michael, it's David. I had a question. When we say there are 19 people at the White House, does that exclude other people who were at the Tony Barrett announcement who also got COVID? or is that inclusive of them?
No, it's, we put out a list and we're updating it right now with the actual people, but it's the people, it's the debate prep team and the White House team, not the people who were at the event.
So shouldn't we be reporting that total number as well then? You're
Well,
not being the White House, 31
No, I
total
do think
kind
it
of
actually
thing?
includes, I think it includes people who are at the event because the senators are on the list, I believe, Virginia, as well as the president of Notre Dame. Well, here's what it is really. I think Virginia said at the White House, but as the list was presented, at least in the super desk note or the political plus note or whatever it was, it's people in Trump's orbit that have tested positive, I believe is the way it's phrased. I don't think it's literally at the White House. There's a different number for at the White House because the senators, obviously, even though they were at the White House for the event, they're not part of the White House team. So we should make sure that we're clear in how we present.
Yeah, everybody's got
that
different
number.
numbers on this is the issue, so we just have to pick a number and stick to it.
I think Trump's orbit
Well, I
is
think it's
to be
actually
the number.
kind of, I think Trump's orbit is probably the best way to do it, but I think it's kind of illustrative of the challenges you have when it comes to contact tracing, that you can't all come to a common number. And it, in a way, helps us tell the story because we're not getting transparency from the White House and they're not participating or cooperating with contact tracing.
Yeah.
Coming back to Carl's point, which I think is a fair frame to explore, it's probably worth dusting off our discussion of the 25th Amendment. This has come up a couple of times. I think with the changes in the cabinet, any kind of 25th Amendment scenario becomes increasingly unlikely because it's a far less politically independent group. But it is part of the discussion, and it might be worth having a panel or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we have to be careful about how far we go with that because there's zero chance that the cabinet is going, short of some dramatic and change that in this that I don't even know what that would be. The cabinet's not going to do that. Mike Pence is not going to do that. So we just have to be careful
I think that's
about.
right. I think, but that's kind of the way I would tell it, Michael. Is like, this is not a realistic option, and even though McMaster brought it up and others, there's no way it's going to happen here.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly true. Thank you, David. What else do people have?
Hey,
Anything
Michael.
else on COVID outside? Oh, go ahead.
Hey, Michael, it's Deanna. Reportedly, Larry Kudlow, I didn't watch it, but Larry Kudlow apparently told CNBC that Trump went into the Oval Office Tuesday with, quote, extra precautions. So
At the same time that Meadows was saying that he didn't and was going in today.
And then I guess he was pressed about it because he added that the traffic was, quote, limited in the Oval Office. And he wouldn't be specific in terms of whether masks were worn. So there you have it.
Yeah. So we'll continue to dig on that as to whether or not he actually went there. Meadows said he didn't. We had reporting that said that he was pushing to go, and that might go today. But I don't know. Larry Kudlow sometimes says things that aren't correct, so I don't know. We'll have to see.
And Caitlin pointed out it's
reporting
hard
turns up.
to believe that Meadows wouldn't know if he had gone. So I just think we have to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, and I think that if he had gone, the president would have wanted a picture out of him in the Oval Office. So, to show, again, I'm back to work, I'm back to normal, everything's good. So I would count on a picture when he does do it. I guess if he didn't. Because
I guess it's not, past Larry to slip up, but the fact that he continued with this conversation and the point as opposed to correcting himself or saying he didn't know much just makes it that much more suspicious.
Yeah. Well, again, our White House team will dig on that and just to try to confirm. And my guess is that he will go there at some point today because he wants to make that statement.
What's our guidance on whether the president? What's our guidance on whether the president could still be contagious at this point, or do we just not know?
From a health perspective, he is almost certainly contagious, although we can't say for sure. The thing that we will need to know, which, I'm not holding my breath for them to tell us, is when he tests negative. That really says that the virus is no longer replicating in his body. It's the same reason it's very unlikely for someone who never tests positive to pass it along. So we would need to know at what point he tests negative, and at that point we could say that he's probably not contagious anymore. But for now, I think we can't say definitely, but almost certainly it's fine.
Any other COVID notes? Anything outside of what's going on at the White House? Okay, thank you. Let's get to, and obviously COVID is going to come up again when David talks about tonight's debate, which is the big story as we get into the second half of the day and tonight. So we'll get back to COVID a little bit probably, but let's go to the rest of domestic, Laura, please.
Sure. So we are monitoring Hurricane Delta as it moves across the Yucatan Peninsula. Matt Rivers is there. International has him there. It has just made landfall as a strong Category 2 with winds at 110 miles per hour. When it moves back into the Gulf, it's expected to turn back into a major hurricane. And landfall is expected Friday night along the Louisiana coast. We have Chad Myers and Tom Sater in the Weather Center. Jacob Blake has been released from the hospital and is at a rehabilitation facility recovering from the Kenosha shooting. His family has said that he's paralyzed from the waist down. We have no further details on that. And also in Wisconsin, the Milwaukee County District Attorney is expected to announce its decision on whether Washita, okay, I cannot pronounce it, the police officer there will face criminal charges for the February 2nd shooting of Alvin Cole. The school district has informed parents that schools are shifting to virtual learning because there are anticipated protests throughout the week, and we have Omar Jimenez around that if news warrants, and that's where we start today.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Other international.
Hey, so Laura mentioned our hurricane coverage. Also, just off the back of Facebook announcing the ban on QAnon material, we look at how this cult has actually gone global, with thousands getting sucked into all of their conspiracy theories that COVID is a hoax and Trump will save the world from the deep state. So Fred Pleiken has that package and analysis. And then just wanted to mention MPW staying across the fighting between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Okay, thanks, Penny. Other business?
Yeah, just that 16-month congressional investigation into Amazon, Apple, Google, and Facebook found that the tech giants held a monopoly power in key business segments and abused their dominance in the marketplace. Brian Fung is up on that this morning. And Penny, of course, mentioned the big story in tech on how Facebook banning QAnon groups and pages. Donnie O'Sullivan is available this morning. He also has sound from Trump supporters at a recent rally defending the organization, saying that it's made up of patriots. So he's up on that this morning as well. That's where we start.
Thanks, Richard. Virginia, other stories from Washington.
Okay, so on voting, Pam has our wrap package today. Trump back to in this tweet storm going on about voter fraud. CNN is looking at this Army of Trump training guide for Election Day vote watchers, so that will be part of that package. Two other things just to note. This Michael Hayden endorsement of Biden is just really powerful, and I know Jim has him later this morning, but it's just, it's a very powerful video, and he says he doesn't know if Trump wins what will happen to America. And then we've talked about this Amy Coney Barrett group that she has belonged to. The Post has new details about this morning. She has yet to acknowledge that she is a member of it, but new details from sort of her time with that group and how close she is to it. And that is what I got.
Okay, thank you, Virginia. Before we get to politics and the debate, does anybody have anything on anything we've talked about so far? Okay, David Chalian, you're up.
Good morning, Michael. So obviously, yes, we're going to drive everything towards debate night tonight in Utah for the one and only vice presidential debate. Obviously, as you noted earlier, coronavirus is front and center, both physically on the stage and in terms of the administration's handling of the pandemic, all while the president is infected with the virus and the White House West Wing staffer after West Wing staffer continues to test positive. In terms of the physical display on the stage, you saw the plexiglass that is there, and the great debate of 2020 over plexiglass seems to be resolved. between the candidates, and you can see that visual of that plexiglass next to each of their areas, which are the candidates are more than 12 feet apart, seated for this debate. As the last debate, it's a 90-minute debate, and it starts at 9 p.m. Eastern. Obviously, the goal for Kamala Harris here is to keep coronavirus front and center, the mismanagement of the pandemic. Obviously, Pence is the head of the task force, and previous rosy predictions that he's made, but also just everything the president has done on this in the last week. Her goal is to try to make Pence defend all of that. Pence is not Trump, and as you can see in our preview stories of the debate, his previous sparring partners in debate sort of marvel at how relentlessly message disciplined he is. So how he navigates his defense of all that Trump behavior in the last week will be obviously a key point of tonight's debate. For his part, Pence's mission, as previewed by the Trump campaign, is to try and paint Kamala Harris as the evidence that the Biden-Harris ticket is a radical left-wing ticket. Her co-sponsorship of Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill, her comments during the primary season about getting rid of private insurance. Obviously, that's not what the Biden-Harris ticket is running on now, of course, but these are her previous positions that Pence will seek to sort of make into the Biden-Harris position. Also, perhaps go after some of her criminal justice record. The history will not be lost on anyone. First African-American, South Asian woman in that role as the vice presidential candidate on the debate stage will no doubt be part of tonight's takeaways as well. In terms of the future presidential debates, you saw Joe Biden last night boarding his plane in Pennsylvania saying that he will not debate Trump next week if Trump still has COVID. You saw Kate Bedingfield on New Day this morning with John Berman saying the burden is on Trump to prove that he's negative and no longer contagious in order for that debate to move forward. And of course, the conversation will continue with the commission on how exactly that debate does move forward. As you know, that debate is scheduled for a week from tomorrow, next Thursday, October 15th in Florida. Virginia mentioned the Hayden Republican Voters Against Trump ad. The Supreme Court Amy Coney Barrett nomination is the focus of our next final chunk of this new CNN poll, national poll we have out this week. We'll release it at noon today. It looks at how sort of slightly more Americans are opposed to her confirmation than in favor of it. Having said that, she's clearly made a favorable first impression on the American public in these numbers. And we look at some of the issues that she might be facing as a Supreme Court justice. Obamacare continues to get more popular. A majority of the country does not want the Supreme Court to overturn it. We also have a majority in this poll saying that she should recuse herself from any election-related matters that may be before the court if she is indeed on it by then. So there's a lot of good stuff in there for folks to take a look at. Two other quick notes on ad spending. You have the Democrats, meaning the Biden campaign plus outside Democratic groups in the home stretch in these next 4 weeks have $100 million advantage in what they preserved on the television airwaves in these final 4 weeks compared to what the Trump campaign and the outside Republican groups have. You do see also the Republicans leaning into a digital strategy here. You saw that $60 million push at the RNC has announced in the closing stretch here, in addition to the Trump digital effort, but an enormous television advertising advantage in what they intend to spend, what they've reserved for the Democrats in these final 4 weeks. As we know, the Trump campaign has been lagging way behind in the fundraising effort. We still await those September fundraising numbers. And in that critical Senate race in Arizona, you saw the McSally-Kelly debate last night. And that moment with Martha McSally when she was asked if she's proud of her support of the president, and it shows you the very embodiment of what it is to be between a rock and a hard place for these vulnerable Republican candidates, these incumbent Republican senators who do not want to disaffect the Trump base of support in the electorate that they need to be there if they have any chance whatsoever, while they're also trying not to repel the rest of the electorate the way Trump seems to be doing right now. So it was a moment to sort of captured that. And I think that's where we start. We've got Jason Carroll up. He was up this morning and throughout the day, and then Ryan Nobles and Kian Lamont take over in Utah tonight for our vice presidential debate coverage out there on the ground. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, David. Does anybody have anything to add or ask about regarding politics and the debate tonight?
Hey, Michael, it's Ben again. Just to weigh in on a couple, medical and health precautions around the debate tonight. I know we discussed this yesterday, but as we move closer to this evening's vice presidential debate, just another note on the plexiglass. It does not protect anybody. It is there for show. Sanjay is more than happy to, and well-versed in talking about that today. I'll give a very silly example, but it sort of makes the point. It's like me putting on a baseball hat to protect myself. It's not going to do anything. What people should be doing inside the hall, especially as more and more evidence comes out for airborne transmission, is wearing a mask. All of the experts, we've talked to have pushed for that and have even gone as far as to say that the candidates should be wearing them themselves anytime they are not talking. There's certainly no need to have an audience or anyone else in the room, and everyone telling Sanjay and Sanjay saying as well, this should really be virtual. And then one more quick note on the testing. The guidelines that have been set was a negative test 72 hours before the debate. The experts we've spoken with have said that, this really speaks to how even doctors and the institutions who have been tasked with coming up with best practices to keep everyone safe may have been compromised by politics. Really, they just don't want to cancel a debate too close to it happening, but there is absolutely no reason that the candidates and others cannot get the results of a PCR test, which is more accurate, on the same day. At most, that would take, 2 to 6 hours to come back. And again, those PCR tests are more accurate than the Abbott test, which is obviously the faster test, but really only suitable when you use it all the time and not as a one-off. And I just think there's, some really important threads from the health perspective to pull on this, and Sanjay is obviously around and available on this today.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Hey, just one devil's advocate point just on the plexiglass thing, because I understand the position you guys have. But in the same way that a mask doesn't 100% prevent someone from passing along the virus because air comes out the sides or on the top or whatever, and people can spread particles more indirectly. But we've shown all those animations. Sanjay talked about it. Look, it reduces it by X percentage. It's from here to here if you're wearing a mask, et cetera, et cetera. Why wouldn't plexiglass also maybe not totally prevent the transmission, but it prevents certainly the direction of, if Mike Pence is talking towards Kamala Harris or Kamala Harris towards the moderator, they can't directly breathe or spit on them even from 12 feet away. And so it at least reduces the chances, if not preventing entirely the chance of spreading the virus. Why wouldn't that be true?
I think that there is a fair conversation to have about that, but I would put the level of protection as very, very low. I think they're far enough away where, like you said, you're not having that droplet, you're not at risk of that droplet transmission. I would almost be more concerned, for the moderators, since they'll be facing forward most of the time. And I think that once, those particles are out, if they are speaking forward, they are floating around the room, over and around the plexiglass barrier. So I personally would put the reduced transmission by the plexiglass very, very low, but certainly a really good question to put to some of the experts in fluid dynamics and other things today.
Because the same is true of a mask, right? I mean, a mask is not a guarantee. It's just it demonstrably lowers the percentage of the ability to transmit stuff, but it doesn't prevent it entirely.
Correct. The difference with the mask is that it would sort of catch and capture those particles much closer, obviously, very, very close to your face before they even get out. But sort of once they're out, they're out. And that's the short answer on the difference.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Please, 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 please. I know we are constantly, but debate coverage starts tonight at 7 p.m. We should be pushing to that hard all day long. Let's go to digital, please.
Hey, good morning. We had 37 million unique users yesterday, another extra strong day. The number one story was Collinson, wrapping everything up with Trump's bizarre and misleading return to the White House. This morning, we've got two stories that are essentially tied for number one. Collinson, again, with Trump's stunning high-risk erratic behavior. That's nearly 20,000 concurrents. And then also nearly 20,000 concurrents is the Arizona Senate debate turning on Trump. Alex Rogers has the byline on that. And Smolkin was noting this morning, our audiences are very much here for down ballot races and for Senate stories in general. Massive interest. We see it consistently. And that's not even a story that we're giving massive play to, and it's tied for number one right now. Let's talk about the rest of the top five. The two women who won the Nobel for chemistry. That's the first, with two women winning. The latest on Hurricane Delta. We've got our DLE up, our hurricane tracker, all of that. Cruise ships that are being torn apart after a coronavirus sell-off. That's a travel story. And then right outside of the top five worth mentioning is a piece on the lesser-known facts about Eddie Van Halen's achievements. On stimulus, we have a really strong package of stories. Just listen to these headlines. It's an insane time for Trump to reject the stimulus. That's Maddie again. Trump just guaranteed a slower recovery from the recession. That's Julia Horowitz. Airlines are disheartened by Trump ending the stimulus talks. The Fed chair warning of an economic tragedy. And then, of course, Tammy Luby and Katie Labasco, as they do so well, have like a what it means for you piece. Trump halted the stimulus talks, and here's what it means for people who are struggling. And then we've got the state of play coming or possibly up now on where we go from here from Mattingly. So big interest in that, too, and a really strong package. A handful of other good headlines on and around COVID. HIPAA and what it means for Trump, the doctor, and the American public. That's Tammy Luby again explaining. 11 political days like we've never seen before. This is Megan Vasquez revisiting the dizzying journey that we've all been on in less than 2 weeks, starting with the Barrett nomination, the Times' tax bombshell, and just unfolding every day from there, getting more and more bizarre and dangerous. We've got a nice piece from Kate Anderson Brower, author of The Residence Inside the White House. And the headline is, former White House resident staff is nervous for their former colleagues, the ushers, the chefs, the maids, the butlers, everyone who works in the White House. So going strong on that angle. A handful of really good international headlines. Even Europe's gold standard nations are struggling with COVID surges, and it's not even winter yet. These are the places that have managed to keep numbers relatively low, but now they're struggling. Places like Netherlands, Iceland, Ireland. That's Luke McGee packaging all that up. A good analysis from James Griffiths in Hong Kong, with Pompeo keeping up the anti-China campaign overseas as Washington plunged into COVID chaos. Speaking of China, there are crowds swarming the Great Wall of China as travel surges during Golden Week. The images are remarkable. I mean, it is packed on the Great Wall of China. A good business kind of consumer story, turkeys are getting smaller this Thanksgiving. Grocery stores are betting that shoppers will have fewer family and friends at the table, so smaller birds. And then, Michael, I need to say, just for the record, when I mentioned that we had beat the Post with that story on the White House having more cases, coronavirus cases in certain countries, I need to retract that statement for the record. The team reminded me that there were some concerns about the methodology with that, so they paused on it. So you're right, the Washington Post did have that. Non-COVID headlines. there are two very good investigates pieces I want to mention. The first one from Scott Glover. He sold an AR-15 to a mass shooter. Now he wanted universal background checks. And then the second one is a follow-up from Blake and Melanie on their great Amazon reporting. Lawmakers say Amazon has turned a blind eye to potential dangers posed by its own brand. There is another story that is in the top 10 this morning on QAnon that really takes a zoom-out global look, how the parasite, quote, parasite QAnon conspiracy cult went global. It's really in-depth reporting and enterprise storytelling. It's very strong and is doing very well, has one of the highest engagement times on the site. September was the hottest September on record, so another disturbing climate headline. And then lastly, on the VP debate, we will be doing all the things. We will also be up at 7 across all digital platforms with a DLE that will be fact-checking and capturing all the moments. The live stream will go up. It is unauthenticated, so no wall. We are also live streaming on YouTube with a pre-debate show from Saliza that we're trying. That's going to happen at 8:30 on YouTube, so that'll be a great experiment. And I'll stop there. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Meredith. I'll give you even bigger props for pausing because of concerns about methodology. That's more important than being first.
Yeah, thanks.
John Antonio.
Good morning. So we'll start at the White House this morning with that LipTAC reporting, really strong. Will Trump head to the Oval Office in the West Wing today? Mark Meadows just knocked down what Kudlow said it's not true. He didn't go there yesterday, but we could see him there. We could see him there later on today. We have the growing list of infected in the Trump circle, and that videotape message, why was it not played last night? Will we see it today? And then Barbara Starr will continue her reporting. She has already some advances this morning on the military top brass and the quarantining that could go through next week and what that means for national security. Sanjay is up today a couple of times, waiting for any health update from the Trump medical team. So we're ready to parse through that language. And obviously the Fauci dire warning about 400,000 potential deaths by this winter is alarming. We will definitely land on that. Dr. Mark McClellan, formerly of the FDA, the FDA does win the timeline battle with the White House. And John King has Pence's former doctor who did resign a couple of years ago, Dr. Virginia Pena, who is highly critical and concerned about how they've been handling this crisis this past week inside the White House. On the debate coverage, Jason Carroll and Ryan Nobles, both up from Utah, just all the atmospherics around the debate, the plexiglass, the distance, the masks. Next hour, we do have Frank Fahrenkopf, the co-chair of the debate commission, so plenty to ask him about tonight's debate and looking ahead to the scheduled debate between Trump and Biden next week and the testing protocols around that. And as Virginia mentioned, Jim Sciutto just did an interview with Michael Hayden on the Biden endorsement. Very critical, really goes after Trump. We will kick that out about 10:15, so watch for that next hour. The stimulus talks collapse. Christine Romans and Lauren Fox on the business and Capitol Hill angles, and the Fed chair is very dire warning about the fact that what's going to happen because they didn't get this passed. John King has Senator John Barroso, so we'll ask him a lot about now what. Brianna has former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, and we also, to put a face on this, we have one of the heads of the Flight Attendants Association on just the profound impact on airline workers now that Washington has yet to do its job and get another package passed. Alexander Field and Adrian Broadus continue to look at the outbreaks from New York to the Midwest and the impact that's having. Dr. Tom Inglesby, as well as Dr. Wachter from the University of California, San Francisco. We will land on that Eli Lilly headline that Ben just mentioned and just did publish. Brianna has a colleague of that North Carolina elementary school teacher who died. Story's gone viral. It's compelling, so we'll land on that. And then Miguel Marquez profile of that family of nurses in California that is going to air next hour. There's also some really strong international headlines. So we have global whips in the mix. And finally, Matt Rivers with some hits out of the Yucatan where Hurricane Delta has slammed into it ahead of its Gulf Coast hit later this week.
Okay, thank you, John. Washington.
Good morning. At 3 o'clock, we'll pick up. Caitlin is from the White House for us, and of course, we'll look ahead at the debate and push to that throughout. Sheldon Whitehouse joins us among our guests. Pam's got that war on voting piece that was Virginia mentioned, and with Trump going after voter fraud. We'll hit on the scuttled relief bill. Pete Montine looking how airlines are particularly screwed. Dr. Paul Sachs and Dr. Mike Sag, both among our medical guests. And with the Pentagon brass wrestling with COVID, we'll update that. And then Barbara takes a look at Afghanistan war, 19 years. At 4 o'clock, Caitlin's got a package for us, and we've got Sanjay, of course. Kyung looking ahead at the debate, and we've got Scott Jennings, Bakari Sellers, Christian Powers, Laura Barone Lopez among our analysts, so I'll spread them out. Erica Hill has the coronavirus wrap at 4, and Dr. Besser is with us, and we'll get Susan Glasser and Peter Baker in as well.
And in the Situation Room, we'll obviously be following all the developments out of this White House in disarray. Will Trump return to the Oval today? And all of these so-called procedures in place for interacting with him, the isolation cart, the PPE, et cetera. We'll follow the growing circle around Trump of people testing positive. Does that continue to expand today as the White House says that they're finished with their contact tracing? We'll also see if we learn anything new about Trump's condition, though unlikely. Meadows says he's feeling great. Did he end up getting that last dose of remdesivir last night? And we'll follow on him abruptly ending these stimulus talks yesterday. Where does that go today? We have Senator Elizabeth Warren booked. We'll also get into the big picture COVID threads. Fauci saying that we could see 400,000 deaths as most of the country continues to trend in the wrong direction. Erica Hill has the wrap piece for us. And then we'll obviously be pushing towards tonight's debate, the layout, the plexiglass questions, the historic nature of the night, the strategies on both sides, Trump's coronavirus obviously front and center. We have former Governor Scott Walker booked. He's helping to prep Pence for the debate tonight. And then we have our Pam Brown voter wrap piece as well. So that's where we're starting.
Okay, thanks, Em. Does anybody have anything else? Okay. Thanks very much, everybody. Reminder, Jeff will be back tomorrow. Thank you. Have a great day.